Elena Voss felt the room tilt the moment she looked into his eyes. The charity gala around her, the clinking glasses, the soft orchestra music, all of it faded into a dull hum. Damien Ashford stood across the ballroom in a black suit that seemed too sharp for the crowd of ordinary people around him, and yet he was staring only at her, as if she were the only person who existed. Her heart pounded so hard she thought others could hear it. She did not understand why a complete stranger could make her knees weak and her breath catch in her throat. She had come to this event to support a children's hospital, not to fall into some strange pull she could not explain. But there it was, a warmth spreading through her chest, a pulling sensation that told her to walk toward him, though every rational part of her mind screamed that this made no sense. Damien crossed the room before she could decide whether to move. When he stood in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, he spoke in a low voice that seemed meant only for her. "I have been waiting my whole life to find you," he said. Elena laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's quite a line for someone I've never met." "It isn't a line," Damien said, his voice steady, almost solemn. "I know how strange this sounds, but something happened the moment I saw you. I felt it in my bones." She should have walked away. Any sensible woman would have, yet she stayed, drawn by something she could not name, something ancient and undeniable that made her feel safe and terrified all at once. What Elena did not know was that Damien Ashford was not simply a wealthy businessman who had wandered into a charity event. He was the alpha king of the Ashford pack, a bloodline of wolves who had ruled their territory for over 2 centuries. Among his kind, a fated mate was not a poetic phrase. It was a bond written into the soul, a connection that could not be broken, ignored, or denied. When 2 souls were matched by nature itself, the pull between them was undeniable, and for an alpha king, finding his mate meant finding the other half of his very existence. Damien had waited 28 years for this moment. He had begun to believe it would never come, that perhaps fate had forgotten him, or worse, that his mate did not exist at all. Many wolves before him had lived and died without ever finding theirs, but the second Elena walked into that ballroom in her deep blue dress, laughing softly with a friend, the bond had ignited like a flame catching dry wood. His wolf, usually calm and controlled, had roared to life inside him, desperate to claim what belonged to him. He did not tell her any of this that first night. He simply asked for her name, learned that she worked as a nurse at the very hospital the gala was raising money for, and asked if he could see her again. Elena, against every instinct of caution she had built over years of independence, said yes. Over the following weeks, Damien courted her with a patience that surprised even himself. He sent her small gifts, nothing extravagant, just things that showed he had listened to every word she said. When she mentioned she loved sunflowers, he had a single one delivered to her apartment every morning. When she mentioned she missed her mother's cooking from her childhood in a coastal town, he found a small restaurant that served a similar dish and took her there without saying a word about why he had chosen it. Elena found herself falling for him slowly, then all at once. She told her closest friend that she felt as though she had known Damien for years, even though they had met only weeks before. She could not explain the comfort she felt in his presence, the way her body seemed to relax the moment he was near, as if some part of her recognized him from a life she could not remember. Damien was careful never to reveal his true nature. His world was hidden from humans, protected by strict laws that governed every pack across the region. A human mate was rare, but not unheard of, and the process of revealing the truth had to be handled with patience and trust. He wanted Elena to fall in love with him first, the man, before she ever had to face the reality of what he was. But even as their bond deepened, Damien could not shake a quiet unease that had settled over him in recent weeks. It began as a whisper at the edge of his senses, a faint feeling that something was watching him, following him, learning his patterns. He dismissed it at first as the paranoia of a king protecting a precious new bond, yet the feeling did not fade. If anything, it grew stronger every time he left Elena's side. He was not wrong to feel uneasy. Miles away, in a small rented house at the edge of the pack's territory, a man who looked exactly like Damien Ashford sat alone in the dark, staring at a photograph he had taken from a distance. In the photograph, Damien stood outside Elena's apartment building, laughing at something she had said, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. Julian Ashford's fingers tightened around the photograph until the edges creased. He and Damien were identical twins, born only minutes apart, sharing the same face, the same voice, the same blood. But where Damien had been raised to lead, trained since childhood to inherit the throne, Julian had spent his life in his brother's shadow, always the second choice. always the one people compared unfavorably to his more composed, more disciplined twin. Years ago, a bitter conflict with their father, the previous Alpha King, had ended with Julian being cast out of the pack entirely. The details of that conflict were known only to a handful of people, and most believed Julian had died in exile, lost to the wilderness beyond Packlands where a wolf without a pack rarely survived long. Damien himself had mourned his brother in his own quiet way, though the two had never been close, and a part of him had always wondered if his brother's exile had been fair. Julian had not died. He had survived through cunning, through alliances with other exiled wolves who resented the ruling packs, and through a slow, patient plan to return one day and reclaim everything he believed had been stolen from him. He had learned dark magic from wolves who lived outside the boundaries of pack law, magic that could mask a scent, disguise a presence, and in rare cases, allow one wolf to walk unnoticed among another pack entirely. He had returned to Ashford territory 3 months ago, hidden by that very magic, watching his brother from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had expected to find Damien ruling comfortably, perhaps married to some pack-born woman chosen for politics rather than love. He had not expected to discover that his brother had found his fated mate. The moment Julian learned of the bond, something inside him shifted. It was no longer only about the throne. It was about proving, once and for all, that he could take anything Damien had, including the one thing meant only for him. He began following Elena in secret, learning her schedule, her habits, the small details of her life. He discovered she left for her hospital shifts every morning at 7, that she stopped at the same small coffee shop every Tuesday and Friday, that she called her mother every Sunday evening. He learned the sound of her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the exact shade of her favorite color. He studied his brother too, more carefully than he ever had before. He watched Damien's mannerisms, the particular way he tilted his head when he was thinking, the low, measured tone of his voice, the small habit of running a hand through his hair when he was frustrated. Julian had always been told he and Damien were identical, but he had never truly tested how far that similarity could stretch. Now, he intended to find out. His plan was simple and cruel in its simplicity. Damien was often called away on pack business, matters that took him beyond the city for days at a time, negotiating with neighboring packs, settling disputes, maintaining the delicate balance of power that kept their territory peaceful. During these absences, Elena was alone, unaware that the man who visited her, who spoke to her in Damien's voice and wore Damien's face, was not the same man she had fallen for at all. Julian began preparing for the day he would take his brother's place, even if only for a few hours at a time. He practiced Damien's walk, his posture, the particular way he held a cup of coffee. He listened to recordings he had secretly captured of his brother's voice, mimicking the cadence until it became second nature. He told himself this was justice, that he was simply taking back a fraction of what fate had denied him for so many years. Meanwhile, Elena remained blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around her. She spent her days working long shifts at the hospital, caring for patients with a gentleness that had earned her the affection of both her colleagues and those she treated. She spent her evenings when Damien was in the city, wrapped in a happiness she had never known before, a sense that her life was finally beginning to make sense. One evening, as she sat on her small balcony overlooking the city lights, Damien called to tell her he would be leaving the following morning for a meeting that would keep him away for nearly a week. His voice carried a heaviness she had not heard before, a reluctance to be away from her even for a short time. "I don't like leaving you," he admitted quietly over the phone. "Not right now." "Why not right now?" Elena asked, curious at the strange edge in his tone. Damien hesitated. He could not tell her the truth, that something felt wrong, that an instinct buried deep in his blood warned him danger was closer than he realized. Instead, he simply said, "I suppose I've just gotten used to seeing you every day. It's strange how quickly that happens." Elena smiled into the phone, her chest warm with affection. "I'll be fine, Damien. It's only a week. Go do what you need to do, and come back to me." He promised her he would, and when the call ended, Elena sat for a long moment staring out at the city, feeling that same strange pull in her chest, the sense that something important was tied to this man, something she could not fully explain but trusted completely. She had no way of knowing that the man who would knock on her door 2 days later, wearing Damien's face and speaking in Damien's voice, would not be the man she trusted at all. The morning Damien left for his meetings, he stopped by Elena's apartment one last time, holding her close in a way that felt almost desperate, as though some part of him sensed the danger waiting on the other side of his departure. He kissed her forehead, then her lips, and told her to be careful, though he could not explain exactly what she needed to be careful of. "I'll call you every night," he promised. "You always do," Elena said, smiling up at him. As his car pulled away from her building, Damien glanced back one final time, an uneasy feeling settling deep in his stomach, a feeling he would later wish he had trusted far sooner than he did. Julian watched the car disappear down the street from a distance, hidden behind the tinted windows of a rented vehicle parked 2 blocks away. A slow, satisfied smile spread across his face, a smile identical to his brother's, yet carrying none of the warmth that defined Damien's true nature. He waited until he was certain his brother was truly gone, then stepped out of the car, straightened his jacket, and walked toward Elena's building with the confident, measured stride he had spent weeks perfecting. It was time to become his brother. Elena heard the knock on her door and smiled before she even opened it, certain it was a delivery or perhaps her neighbor Grace, who often stopped by unannounced to borrow sugar or complain about her landlord. When she pulled the door open, her breath caught in surprise. "Damien?" she said, blinking in confusion. "I thought you were leaving for your meetings today." Julian, wearing his brother's face with practiced ease, offered a small, apologetic smile. "The meetings got pushed back a day. I couldn't leave without seeing you one more time." It was a lie crafted carefully in advance, one Julian had rehearsed in the mirror until the words came without hesitation. Elena, having no reason to suspect deception, simply felt a rush of happiness at the unexpected visit and stepped aside to let him in. "I'm glad," she said. "I was already missing you, which is ridiculous since you only left this morning." Julian laughed softly, mimicking the exact rhythm of his brother's laughter, a sound he had studied for hours from recordings he had secretly captured. "Not ridiculous at all. I feel the same way." He stepped into her apartment, taking in the details he had only observed from a distance before. The small bookshelf crowded with worn paperbacks, the framed photograph of Elena with an older woman he assumed was her mother, the faint scent of lavender from a candle burning on the kitchen counter. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle he needed to complete his disguise. Elena made tea for them both, chatting easily about her day at the hospital, a difficult case involving a young patient who had finally been cleared to go home after weeks of treatment. Julian listened, nodding at the right moments, offering brief comments that mirrored the kind of quiet, thoughtful responses Damien typically gave. He had studied his brother's speech patterns carefully, and for the most part, the imitation held. But there were things Julian could not know, details too small and too personal for him to have learned through simple observation. When Elena mentioned an old joke about the terrible coffee at the hospital cafeteria, a joke she and Damien had shared weeks earlier during one of their first dates, Julian's expression remained blank for just a fraction of a second too long. "You remember," Elena said, laughing. "The coffee that tasted like burnt rubber." Julian forced a small laugh, covering his confusion. "Of course, how could I forget?" Elena did not notice the hesitation, too caught up in the warmth of the moment to look closely for cracks in the illusion. She leaned against him on the small couch, resting her head on his shoulder, and for a moment, Julian felt something unfamiliar stir inside him, a strange, unwelcome flicker of guilt. He pushed the feeling down quickly. He had not come this far, endured years of exile and hardship, only to be stopped by guilt over stealing something that should have belonged to him from the very beginning. If fate had been fair, he told himself, he would have been the one born first, the one destined for the throne and everything that came with it. This was simply correcting an old mistake. Over the following days, while the real Damien remained occupied with pact negotiations 200 miles away, Julian continued his deception, visiting Elena under the guise of unexpected free time between meetings. He grew more confident with each visit, learning to read her reactions, adjusting his behavior to fit the image she had built of the man she loved. Yet small inconsistencies continued to slip through, tiny cracks that Elena noticed but could not quite explain. One afternoon, as they walked through a nearby park, Elena reached for his hand out of habit, expecting the familiar warmth of Damien's touch. Julian's hand, though it looked identical, felt subtly different, the grip slightly less certain, the fingers positioned in a way that felt almost foreign. She dismissed the thought at first, assuming she was simply imagining things, perhaps overthinking small details because of nerves about how quickly their relationship had progressed. But the feeling lingered, a quiet unease she could not fully shake, even as she continued to enjoy the time they spent together. Another evening, while sharing dinner at a small restaurant Damien had taken her to before, Elena mentioned a private joke about the waiter who had once mixed up their orders in a memorable way. Julian, who had no memory of this event because it had happened before he began his surveillance, simply stared at her blankly for a moment before recovering with a vague comment that did not quite match her enthusiasm. You don't remember Mr. Alvarez getting our orders backward? Elena asked, her brow furrowing slightly. You laughed so hard you nearly choked on your water. Julian forced a chuckle, quickly changing the subject to something else. But the moment left a small seed of doubt planted in Elena's mind, one she could not quite ignore. She began confiding these small inconsistencies to her closest friend, Grace, a fellow nurse who had grown close to Elena over the past year working together at the hospital. Grace listened carefully one evening as they sat together after a long shift, sharing a quiet dinner in the hospital cafeteria. He forgot the thing with the waiter? Grace asked, frowning. And his hand felt different? I know it sounds silly, Elena admitted, poking at her food absently. Maybe I'm just imagining things. Maybe I'm nervous because everything is moving so fast, and part of me is looking for reasons to doubt it. Grace, however, was not entirely convinced. She had met Damien only twice, but something about the description Elena gave, the subtle shift in demeanor, the small gaps in shared memory, struck her as odd rather than simply nerves. Maybe you should mention it to him directly, Grace suggested. See how he reacts. If it really is nothing, he'll probably laugh it off easily. Elena considered the advice, deciding she would bring it up gently the next time Damien visited, hoping for a simple explanation that would put her mind at ease. Meanwhile, at the PAC's main estate, Marcus, Damien's most trusted beta and closest friend since childhood, found himself troubled by reports from PAC scouts who patrolled the territory's borders. Several scouts had reported catching a faint, unfamiliar scent near the edges of PAC land, a scent that carried traces of something wolf-like, yet distorted, as though masked by unfamiliar magic. Marcus initially dismissed the reports as nothing more than a stray wolf passing through unclaimed territory, a common enough occurrence that rarely posed any real threat. But when a scout mentioned catching a fleeting glimpse of someone who bore a striking resemblance to Damien himself, walking near the edge of the city while the Alpha King was supposedly 200 miles away in negotiations, Marcus felt a cold unease settle over him. He decided to investigate quietly, without alarming the rest of the PAC, understanding that any mention of an imposter wearing the Alpha King's face could cause widespread panic if handled carelessly. He began reviewing security footage from various points around the city, searching for any sign of his king in places he should not have been. What he found sent a chill through him. Grainy footage from a security camera outside Elena's apartment building showed a man who looked exactly like Damien entering the building on a day when Marcus knew, without doubt, that Damien had been in a meeting nearly 200 miles away, a meeting Marcus himself had helped arrange. Marcus stared at the footage for a long time, his mind racing through possibilities. A shifter with the ability to mimic another's appearance was rare, but not unheard of among certain dark magic practitioners who lived beyond PAC law. If someone had gained access to that kind of magic, and chosen to impersonate the Alpha King specifically, the implications were deeply troubling. He considered contacting Damien immediately, but hesitated, knowing his king was in the middle of delicate negotiations that could not easily be interrupted without risking the fragile peace between neighboring PACs. Instead, Marcus decided to gather more concrete evidence before raising an alarm, understanding that accusing someone of impersonating the Alpha King was not something to be done lightly. He began quietly investigating Elena's recent movements, careful not to alarm her, understanding that if his suspicions were correct, she was likely an unwitting victim of a deception far more dangerous than she could imagine. He learned of her recent visits with Damien, cross-referencing the times and locations with his king's actual schedule, and found the discrepancies mounting with each passing day. By the end of the week, Marcus had gathered enough evidence to be certain something deeply wrong was happening, though he still lacked proof of who exactly was behind the deception. He decided it was time to speak with Elena directly, hoping she might provide details that would help him understand the full scope of what was happening before Damien returned from his negotiations. He arranged to meet her outside the hospital where she worked, choosing a public location where she would feel safe speaking openly. When Elena arrived, tired from a long shift but curious about the unexpected meeting, Marcus wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. I need to ask you something important, Marcus said carefully, watching her expression closely. Has Damien visited you recently, in the past week, while he was supposed to be away at negotiations? Elena's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Yes, actually, several times. Why are you asking me this? Marcus took a deep breath, choosing his next words carefully, aware that what he was about to say would likely shake her entire understanding of the past week. Elena, I need you to listen carefully. Damien has been in continuous negotiations for the past 6 days, nearly 200 miles from here. He has not left that location once during that time. Elena felt the blood drain from her face as the implications of his words settled over her. That's not possible. I've spent time with him. We had dinner. We talked. It was him. I believe you saw someone who looked exactly like him, Marcus said gently. But it was not Damien. Elena sat frozen on the bench outside the hospital, her hands trembling in her lap as Marcus's words settled over her like cold water. That's not possible, she repeated, though even as she said it, small memories began rushing back. The strange gaps in shared jokes, the subtle difference in the way his hand had felt against hers, the moments where his reactions seemed just slightly off from what she expected. I know this is difficult to hear, Marcus said quietly, sitting beside her, careful to keep his voice calm despite the urgency he felt inside. But I need you to think carefully. Is there anyone who might look identical to Damien? A relative, perhaps? Elena shook her head slowly. He never mentioned having a brother. He talked about his parents sometimes, but never a sibling. Marcus exhaled slowly, weighing how much to reveal. He knew the story of Julian's exile was not something widely discussed within the pack, a painful chapter in the Ashford family history that Damien himself rarely spoke of. But given the circumstances, Marcus understood that Elena deserved to know the truth, or at least enough of it to protect herself. Damien has a twin brother, Marcus said finally. His name is Julian. He was cast out of the pack many years ago, long before you ever met Damien. Most of us believed he had died in exile. If he has returned, and if he is the one who has been visiting you, then we are dealing with something far more dangerous than a simple misunderstanding. Elena's mind raced, trying to piece together every interaction from the past week, searching for any sign she might have missed, any moment that should have alerted her sooner. She felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat, not only from the deception itself, but from the unsettling realization that a stranger had been in her home, had held her hand, had sat across from her at dinner, all while wearing the face of the man she trusted completely. I need to call him, Elena said suddenly, reaching for her phone. I need to hear his voice, the real one. Marcus nodded, understanding her need for confirmation. Go ahead, I'll wait. When Damien answered the phone, his voice carried the same warmth Elena had grown to love, yet now she found herself listening carefully for any hint of difference, any small detail that might reveal whether this truly was him. Elena, Damien said, clearly pleased to hear from her. I was just thinking about you. Is everything all right? Elena's voice trembled slightly as she asked, Damien, do you remember the joke about Mr. Alvarez mixing up our dinner order? The one where you laughed so hard you nearly choked? There was a brief pause on the line before Damien responded, confusion evident in his tone. Of course I remember. Why are you asking me this? Elena, what's wrong? The genuine confusion in his voice, combined with his accurate memory of the shared moment, confirmed what Marcus had already suspected. This was truly Damien on the phone, hundreds of miles away, which meant the man who had visited her throughout the week had indeed been someone else entirely. Elena's breath caught as tears welled in her eyes, a mixture of relief at hearing her true mate's voice and horror at the realization of what had actually happened. Damien, I need you to come home. Please. Something happened, and Marcus is here with me right now. He can explain more than I can right now. Damien's tone shifted instantly from confusion to alarm. Elena, tell me what's wrong. Are you hurt? Are you safe? I'm safe, Elena assured him quickly, though her voice still shook. But someone has been pretending to be you. Someone who looks exactly like you. The silence that followed stretched long enough that Elena wondered if the call had dropped. When Damien finally spoke again, his voice had changed entirely, dropping to a low, dangerous register that Elena had never heard from him before. Julian, Damien said, the name coming out like a curse. Relene, listen to me carefully. I am ending these negotiations immediately, and I will be back within hours. Stay with Marcus. Do not go anywhere alone. Do you understand me? I understand, Elena said, gripping the phone tightly. I promise you, Elena, whatever he told you, whatever he did, this is not your fault. None of this is your fault. I will handle this. After the call ended, Elena sat quietly for a long moment, processing the whirlwind of emotions crashing through her. Marcus watched her carefully, understanding the shock she must be feeling, having her entire understanding of the past week upended in a matter of minutes. I feel foolish, Elena admitted quietly. I should have noticed sooner. The way he moved, the things he didn't remember. I should have known something was wrong. Marcus shook his head firmly. You have no reason to feel foolish. Julian has spent years planning this deception, studying every detail of Damien's mannerisms. Even those closest to Damien might have been fooled under similar circumstances. This is not a failure on your part. It is a calculated act of manipulation on his. Elena appreciated the reassurance, though the unsettled feeling in her stomach remained, a lingering sense of violation that she knew would take time to fully process. She thought about the moments she had shared with the imposter, moments she had believed were genuine, and felt a fresh wave of anger rise within her, directed not at herself, but at the man who had so callously deceived her. Marcus arranged for additional pack members to discreetly watch over Elena's apartment while Damien made the journey back to the city, understanding that Julian, having been discovered, might act unpredictably. He drove Elena home himself, staying close by as she gathered a few belongings, insisting that she stay somewhere more secure until Damien arrived and the full situation could be addressed. Elena reluctantly agreed, recognizing the wisdom in the precaution, even as she felt a flare of frustration at having her routine so completely disrupted by someone else's cruel scheme. She packed a small bag, casting one last glance around her apartment, the space that had felt so safe and familiar just hours before now carrying an unsettling weight, knowing that Julian had walked through these very rooms pretending to be someone he was not. As they drove toward the pack estate where Marcus insisted she would be safest, Elena found herself staring out the window, replaying every interaction from the past week with new understanding. She thought of the strange hesitations, the moments of confusion that had flickered across his face, moments she now understood as gaps in a carefully constructed lie. "What happens now?" Elena asked quietly, as the city gave way to quieter, tree-lined roads leading toward pack territory. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "Damien will want to speak with you, to make certain you are truly safe and unharmed. As for Julian, that is a matter that goes beyond simple deception. He has broken laws that govern our kind, laws about impersonation, about violating another wolf's mate bond. There will be consequences, though I cannot say exactly what form they will take." Elena nodded slowly, though her mind remained elsewhere, still processing the strange, unsettling reality of the past week. She thought about the moment she had first met Damien at the gala, the instant, undeniable pull she had felt toward him, a connection so strong it defied explanation. She wondered now if Julian, sharing the same blood, the same face, might have felt some echo of that same connection toward her, twisted into something far darker than the genuine bond she shared with his brother. The thought unsettled her deeply. If Julian felt any version of that same pull, however corrupted, it meant he would not simply walk away quietly now that his deception had been discovered. Men who felt entitled to something rarely relinquished it without a fight, and Elena had a growing suspicion that Julian considered her, and the throne his brother held, both things he believed had been unfairly denied to him. As the car pulled through the gates of the Ashford Pack Estate, an imposing structure surrounded by dense forest and high stone walls, Elena felt the weight of her new reality settle fully over her. She was no longer simply a nurse who had fallen unexpectedly in love with a charming stranger. She was the fated mate of an alpha king, caught in the middle of a bitter conflict between brothers that had clearly been building for years, long before she had ever entered the picture. Marcus led her inside, introducing her briefly to a few trusted members of the household staff who would ensure her safety and comfort until Damien's return. Elena settled into a quiet guest room, staring out the window at the darkening sky, waiting anxiously for the moment Damien would finally walk through the door, hoping that his return would bring answers, and perhaps some sense of security after the unsettling revelations of the day. Hours passed slowly, each minute stretching longer than the last, until finally, the sound of a car approaching the estate broke the heavy silence. Elena rose quickly, her heart racing with a mixture of relief and lingering unease, uncertain exactly what confrontation awaited once Damien and Julian finally stood face to face for the first time since the deception had been exposed. Damien strode through the front doors of the estate with a tension in his shoulders that Marcus had rarely seen, even during the most difficult pact negotiations. His eyes found Elena immediately, and the sight of her, safe and standing at the top of the staircase, seemed to loosen something tight in his chest. He crossed the distance between them quickly, pulling her into his arms without a word, holding her close, as though reassuring himself she was truly unharmed. Elena melted into the embrace, the familiar warmth of his touch, the way his hand rested against her back, finally confirming what she already knew from their phone call. This was truly him. "I am so sorry," Damien murmured against her hair. "I should have sensed something was wrong sooner. I should have protected you from this." "You didn't know," Elena said softly, pulling back just enough to look up at him. "None of us knew." Damien's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with a fury Elena had not seen from him before. "I should have known my own brother was capable of something like this. I underestimated him, and you paid the price for my mistake." Marcus stepped forward carefully, understanding the delicate nature of the conversation ahead. Damien, we need to discuss how to proceed. Julian is clearly still in the area. He would not have risked exposure this way without a plan for what comes next. Damien nodded grimly, his arm still wrapped protectively around Elena's shoulders. He wants the throne. He always has. And now, apparently, he wants what he believes should have been his in every other way as well. The words hung heavy in the air, and Elena felt a chill run through her at the implication. Julian did not simply want to embarrass his brother or cause temporary chaos. He wanted to take everything that belonged to Damien, including her. That evening, as the estate settled into a tense quiet, pack scouts reported a disturbance near the eastern border of the territory, close to where Julian had been previously spotted. Damien, unwilling to wait passively for his brother's next move, insisted on investigating personally. Despite Marcus's concerns about the Alpha King putting himself at unnecessary risk, he wants to provoke you, Marcus warned as they prepared to leave the estate. This could be exactly what he is hoping for. Then let him have his confrontation, Damien said, his voice hard with resolve. I would rather face him directly than allow him to continue lurking in the shadows, threatening what is mine. Elena, refusing to be left behind without answers, insisted on accompanying them part way, though Marcus firmly established that she would remain within the protected perimeter of trusted pack guards, while Damien ventured closer to the reported disturbance. She watched anxiously as he disappeared into the tree line, flanked by several loyal pack warriors, her heart pounding with worry despite her trust in his strength and experience. Deep within the forest, Damien's senses sharpened, his enhanced hearing picking up the faint sound of movement ahead. The scent that reached him was unmistakable now that he knew to look for it, a familiar trace beneath layers of concealment magic, the scent of his own blood twisted into something foreign and unwelcome. I know you're here, Julian, Damien called out, his voice carrying clearly through the quiet forest. Hiding in the shadows was always your specialty. A slow, mocking laugh echoed from somewhere among the trees, and moments later, Julian stepped into a small clearing bathed in moonlight, his face an exact mirror of his brother's, yet carrying an expression of cold satisfaction that Damien's features never held. Brother, Julian said, spreading his arms wide in mock greeting, it took you long enough to notice me. I was beginning to think you had grown careless, wrapped up so completely in your new mate. Damien's fists clenched at his sides, every instinct urging him to close the distance between them and end this confrontation immediately. Yet years of discipline as a leader held him steady. What do you want, Julian? You've made your point. You proved you could deceive her. Now leave, before this ends badly for you. Julian's expression darkened, the mocking smile fading into something colder, more dangerous. Deceive her? I gave her a glimpse of what her life could have been, had fate made a different choice all those years ago. I was simply exploring what should have been mine from the beginning. She is not a prize to be claimed, Damien said, his voice low and dangerous. And the throne was never yours to take. Father made his decision for reasons you refuse to understand. Father made his decision because he favored you, Julian spat, years of buried resentment finally surfacing. He always favored you, the composed, disciplined firstborn, while I was cast aside, exiled for daring to question his authority. I have spent years surviving in the wilderness, learning to take what I need by whatever means necessary, and I will not simply walk away now that I have finally found something worth fighting for. You will leave her alone, Damien said, his voice carrying an edge of warning that vibrated with barely contained fury. This is your only chance to walk away peacefully. Julian's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, something flickered across his expression that might have been genuine emotion, quickly buried beneath cold determination. I have never walked away from anything easily, brother. Not from this pack, not from the life I was denied, and certainly not from her. The threat hung heavy in the cool night air, and Damien felt his wolf stirring restlessly beneath his skin, urging him to end this confrontation through force rather than words. Yet he held himself in check, understanding that an impulsive attack here, in the dark forest with limited witnesses, could easily be twisted by Julian into a narrative that painted Damien as the aggressor. This is not over, Julian said finally, taking a step backward into the shadows of the trees. You may have exposed my deception, but you have not stopped me. I will find another way, brother. I always do. Before Damien could respond, Julian turned and disappeared into the darkness, his enhanced speed carrying him beyond immediate pursuit within seconds. Damien stood alone in the clearing, breathing heavily, torn between the urge to give chase and the awareness that doing so recklessly could play directly into whatever plan his brother had already set in motion. He returned to where Elena waited, relaying the confrontation, with a grim expression that told her more than his words ever could. She listened carefully, a growing sense of dread settling over her as she absorbed the full extent of Julian's obsession and determination. "He's not going to stop," Elena said quietly once Damien finished. "Is he?" Damien's expression hardened, though his hand found hers, holding it firmly, as though reassuring them both. "No, he won't stop until he either succeeds or is stopped permanently. I should have realized that the moment I learned what he had done." "Then we need a plan," Elena said, steadying herself despite the fear coursing through her. "We can't just wait for him to make his next move." Marcus, who had been listening quietly nearby, stepped forward with a suggestion. "We increase security around the estate and around Elena's usual routines. We also alert neighboring packs, in case Julian attempts to seek allies or resources beyond our territory, and we watch closely for any sign of the specific magic he has been using. If we can identify its source, we may be able to counter it." Damien nodded, appreciating his beta's steady, practical approach even amid the emotional turmoil of the situation. "Agreed, but we also need to consider that Julian may attempt something more direct if subtlety fails him. We cannot afford to underestimate him a second time." As the night wore on, plans were set into motion, security measures tightened, and watchful eyes stationed throughout the territory, all while a quiet, unspoken tension lingered over the estate. Elena, despite the fear that had settled into her chest since learning the truth, found a measure of strength in Damien's steady presence beside her, a reminder that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. Yet even as the pack prepared for whatever Julian might attempt next, none of them could have anticipated just how far he was willing to go to claim what he believed was rightfully his, nor the devastating lengths he would resort to when every other avenue had been exhausted. Days passed in a tense, watchful quiet. Elena continued her shifts at the hospital, though now flanked at a discreet distance by pack guards disguised as ordinary hospital visitors or maintenance workers, their true purpose known only to her and Damien. She hated the constant surveillance, the loss of the simple independence she had always valued, yet she understood the necessity of it given everything Julian had already proven himself capable of. Damien, meanwhile, threw himself into strengthening the pack's defenses, meeting with trusted advisors, reviewing security footage from every entrance to the territory, and reaching out cautiously to allied packs who might have information about Julian's movements or the source of his concealment magic. He found himself sleeping less, his mind constantly turning over possibilities, searching for the angle Julian might exploit next. One evening, as Elena finished a particularly long shift, she found herself walking to her car in the hospital parking garage, her guard trailing a respectful distance behind her as usual. The garage was nearly empty at this late hour, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting long shadows between the parked vehicles. She had almost reached her car when a voice called out from the shadows, a voice that made her blood run cold with recognition. "Elena." She spun around, her heart hammering, to find Julian standing several feet away, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Her guard, positioned near the garage entrance, had not yet noticed his approach, and Elena felt a fresh wave of fear rush through her at finding herself alone with the man who had so thoroughly deceived her. "Stay away from me," she said firmly, backing toward her car, one hand fumbling for her phone in her pocket. Julian raised his hand slowly, an expression of practiced calm settling over his features. "I only want to talk. I mean you no harm, Elena. I never did." "You lied to me," Elena said, anger overtaking her fear as she found her voice. "You pretended to be someone you're not. You violated my trust in the worst possible way." "I gave you a version of happiness," Julian countered, taking a small step closer despite her clear discomfort. "Was it truly so different from what you feel with him? The same face, the same voice. Perhaps the connection you felt was never truly about my brother specifically, but about something deeper, something that exists between us as well." Elena's stomach turned at the suggestion, revulsion clear on her face. "That's not how this works, and you know it. What I feel for Damien has nothing to do with his face or his voice. It's him, only him." Julian's expression darkened at her firm rejection, the careful mask of calm slipping to reveal the frustration simmering beneath. "You don't understand what it's like, watching someone else claim everything you were denied, simply because of the order in which we were born. I could give you everything he can. More even. I have seen what true ambition can accomplish, unlike my brother, who has grown comfortable and complacent, ruling a territory he never had to fight for." "I don't want power or ambition or anything you're offering," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear still coursing through her. "I want the truth, and the truth is that you deceived me, and nothing you say now will change that." Before Julian could respond further, Elena's guard, having finally noticed the confrontation from across the garage, called out sharply, rushing toward them with clear alarm. Julian's eyes flickered toward the approaching guard, calculating his options quickly. "This is not finished," he said quietly, his gaze locking onto Elena's with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "I will not simply disappear because you reject me. Nothing worth having has ever come easily to me, and I do not intend to give up now." He disappeared into the shadows of the garage before the guard could reach them, his enhanced speed carrying him out of sight within seconds. Elena stood trembling, her guard quickly checking on her welfare while simultaneously alerting Marcus and Damien to the encounter. Damien arrived within the hour, his expression a mixture of fury and fear at how close Julian had come to isolating Elena despite their security measures. He held her close, examining her carefully for any sign of injury, relieved to find she remained physically unharmed despite the deeply unsettling encounter. "He's escalating," Damien said grimly once Elena had recounted the conversation in full. "He's not simply trying to deceive us anymore. He's trying to convince you directly, and when that fails, I fear what he might attempt next." "He said this isn't finished," Elena said quietly, still shaken by the encounter. "He made it sound like a threat." Marcus, who had joined them upon hearing the news, frowned deeply as he considered the implications. "We need to reconsider our approach. Passive defense clearly is not deterring him. Perhaps it is time to actively pursue him, rather than simply waiting for his next attempt." Damien agreed reluctantly, understanding the risks involved in actively hunting his own brother, yet recognizing that Julian's escalating boldness left little alternative. He dispatched additional scouts to search the territory more aggressively, hoping to locate Julian's hiding place before he could attempt anything further. Yet even as these efforts intensified, Julian remained frustratingly elusive, his concealment magic proving effective against even the most experienced pack trackers. Days turned into a tense standoff, with Elena's movements restricted further for her safety, a reality that weighed heavily on her despite her understanding of its necessity. One afternoon, as Elena sat quietly in the estate's garden, seeking a brief moment of peace amid the constant tension, she noticed a young pack member she did not recognize, approaching with a small envelope in hand. "This was left at the front gate," the young man explained, handing her the envelope with a puzzled expression. "It's addressed specifically to you." Elena's stomach tightened with unease as she took the envelope, immediately alerting a nearby guard before opening it carefully. Inside was a single handwritten note, the penmanship eerily similar to Damien's own handwriting, a detail that made her hands tremble as she read the message. The note contained only a few lines, yet the implication behind them sent a chill through her entire body. Julian had written that he understood her rejection, that he respected her loyalty to his brother, but that loyalty alone would not be enough to protect her from what he intended to do next. He wrote that if he could not have her willingly, he would ensure that Damien understood exactly what it felt like to lose everything he valued most, just as Julian himself had lost everything years before. Elena immediately brought the note to Damien, watching as his expression shifted from concern to barely contained rage as he read the threatening words scrawled across the page. "He's planning something specific," Damien said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "This isn't simply a threat meant to frighten us. This reads like a warning before action." Marcus, examining the note carefully, agreed with grave concern. "We need to increase security immediately, particularly around any upcoming pack events or gatherings where Elena's presence would be expected. If he intends to act, he will likely choose a moment of maximum visibility, a moment designed to inflict maximum pain and humiliation." Damien's mind immediately turned to the upcoming pack ceremony scheduled for the following week, an important gathering meant to formally introduce Elena to the wider pack community as his intended mate. The event had been planned for months, a significant occasion drawing pack members from across the territory, and Damien felt a cold dread settle over him at the realization of just how vulnerable such a public gathering might leave them. "The ceremony," Damien said quietly, meeting Marcus's eyes with grim understanding. "If he wants maximum impact, that is exactly where he would strike." "Then perhaps we should postpone it," Marcus suggested carefully, "until we have located him and neutralized this threat entirely." Damien considered the suggestion for a long moment, torn between the practical wisdom of delay and a fierce, protective instinct that refused to allow his brother's threats to dictate his choices indefinitely. If we postpone, we simply give him more time to plan something even more dangerous. Perhaps it is better to proceed as planned, but with security measures far beyond what he would anticipate. Elena listened to the discussion with a growing sense of unease, understanding the risks involved regardless of which choice they made. Yet she also recognized a stubborn refusal within herself to allow Julian's threats to control her life entirely, a determination that matched Damien's own resolve not to be cowed by his brother's obsession. "I don't want to hide," Elena said firmly, drawing both men's attention. "If we cancel this ceremony, if we let him dictate our choices through fear, he wins in a way that has nothing to do with taking me by force. Let's proceed, but let's be smarter than he expects us to be." Damien studied her for a long moment, admiration and worry mingling in his expression, before finally nodding in agreement. "Then we proceed, but with every possible precaution in place. I will not allow him to harm you, Elena, whatever it takes." As preparations continued for the ceremony, an undercurrent of tension permeated every conversation, every security briefing, every quiet moment shared between Damien and Elena. Both understood that the coming days would likely bring the confrontation they had been anticipating since the moment Julian's deception had first been exposed, though neither could have fully anticipated just how dramatically that confrontation would unfold. The day of the ceremony arrived beneath a clear autumn sky. The estate grounds transformed into a scene of quiet elegance, with rows of white chairs arranged before a raised platform draped in the deep green and gold colors of the Ashford pack. Hundreds of pack members had gathered from across the territory, eager to witness the formal introduction of their king's fated mate, unaware of the danger that lingered at the edges of the celebration. Elena stood in a private room within the estate, dressed in a flowing gown the color of autumn leaves, her hands trembling slightly as one of the household staff helped fasten the final details of her outfit. Despite the beauty of the occasion, she could not fully shake the anxiety coiled tightly in her chest, a persistent awareness that Julian's threat still hung over every moment of the day. Damien appeared at her door moments before the ceremony was set to begin, dressed formally in deep colors that matched the pack's traditional attire, his expression a careful mixture of calm confidence and quiet vigilance. He crossed the room and took her hands gently in his own. "You look beautiful," he said softly, "and you are safe. I have guards positioned throughout the grounds, more than anyone realizes. If he attempts anything today, we will be ready." Elena nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence, though the unease in her stomach refused to fully settle. "I trust you," she said quietly. "Let's do this." The ceremony began smoothly, pack elders offering traditional blessings, Marcus standing close by, as Damien's most trusted advisor, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd for any sign of disturbance. Elena stood beside Damien on the raised platform, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, yet finding comfort in the warmth of Damien's hand resting against the small of her back. Everything proceeded without incident through the initial blessings and formal introductions, and Elena began to allow herself a small measure of relief as the ceremony moved toward its conclusion. It was during the final portion, as pack elders prepared to formally announce her status before the assembled crowd, that a sudden commotion erupted near the back of the gathering. Screams broke out as a thick, unnatural fog began rolling across the estate grounds, spreading with unnatural speed despite the clear, cloudless sky moments before. Panic rippled through the crowd as visibility dropped dramatically, pack members stumbling in confusion, unable to see clearly even a few feet ahead. "Julian," Damien growled, immediately positioning himself protectively in front of Elena, his eyes straining to penetrate the sudden, magical fog that had engulfed the entire ceremony. Marcus shouted orders to nearby guards, attempting to organize a defensive perimeter despite the chaos and confusion spreading through the crowd. Yet within the thick fog, it became almost impossible to distinguish friend from potential threat, every shadow suddenly menacing in the disorienting mist. Elena felt Damien's hand tighten around her own, as they attempted to move toward the estate's interior, seeking safety away from the exposed platform. Yet before they could take more than a few steps, a sharp, sudden force struck Damien from behind, separating his hand from Elena's grip as he was thrown several feet away, disappearing into the swirling fog. "Damien!" Elena screamed, reaching desperately toward where he had stood only moments before, her voice swallowed by the chaos surrounding her. A hand closed firmly around her arm from behind, and for one terrifying moment, Elena believed help had arrived, until she caught sight of the face emerging from the fog beside her, identical to Damien's, yet carrying an expression of cold, triumphant satisfaction that confirmed her worst fear. "Come with me quietly," Julian said, his voice low and urgent, "and no one else needs to get hurt today." Elena struggled against his grip, attempting to call out for help, but Julian's other hand came up quickly, pressing something against her skin, a small object that released a strange, tingling sensation racing through her body. Her vision blurred, her limbs growing heavy and unresponsive despite her frantic attempts to fight back, the dark magic working quickly to suppress her voice and movement entirely. "I did warn you," Julian murmured as he half-carried, half-dragged her limp form through the thick fog, moving with practiced efficiency toward a waiting vehicle hidden at the edge of the estate grounds. "I told you this was not finished." Within the estate grounds, chaos continued to reign, as pack guards struggled to re-establish order amid the unnatural fog, Marcus shouting commands as he coordinated a search for both the Alpha King and his missing mate. Damien, having recovered from the sudden blow that had separated him from Elena, fought his way back through the disorienting mist, panic rising sharply in his chest as he searched desperately for any sign of her. "Elena!" he called out repeatedly, his voice growing more frantic with each passing moment that brought no response. It was Marcus who finally located him, guiding him toward the platform where the confrontation had begun, both men quickly realizing with growing horror that Elena was nowhere to be found among the scattered, frightened crowd. "She's gone," Damien said, his voice barely a whisper as the devastating realization settled over him. He took her. The fog began to dissipate gradually as whatever magic had summoned it started to fade, revealing the full scope of the chaos left in its wake. Overturned chairs, scattered decorations, and pack members huddled together in frightened clusters, none of whom had witnessed exactly what had happened to their king's mate. Damien stood frozen for a moment, grief and fury warring within him as the reality of the situation crashed over him fully. His brother had not merely threatened Elena from a distance, he had taken her, right from beneath their combined security measures, exploiting a moment of chaos to accomplish exactly what he had promised. Something deep within Damien shifted in that moment, a primal, ancient fury awakening from a place he had never before accessed, a rage so complete and consuming that it threatened to overwhelm every careful, disciplined instinct he had spent his entire life cultivating as a leader. "Marcus," Damien said, his voice dropping to a register that made even his most trusted friend take an involuntary step backward. "Gather every available tracker, every warrior. We are finding her, and when we find Julian, there will be no more warnings, no more restraint." Marcus nodded quickly, recognizing the shift in his king's demeanor, a transformation that spoke of something far beyond ordinary anger. "I'll assemble everyone immediately. We will find her, Damien." As the pack scrambled to organize a search, Damien stood alone for a brief moment, closing his eyes and reaching inward toward a part of himself he had rarely needed to access. An ancient power passed down through generations of Ashford rulers. A transformation so powerful it had not been fully unleashed in nearly 100 years. He felt it stirring now, responding to the desperate need to protect his mate, growing stronger with every passing second that Elena remained in his brother's hands. Whatever restraint had governed him throughout this entire ordeal was rapidly dissolving, replaced by something far more primal, far more dangerous, a force that even Damien himself was uncertain he could fully control once fully unleashed. The hunt was about to begin, and Julian, wherever he had taken Elena, was about to discover that provoking an Alpha King's deepest instincts to protect his fated mate was perhaps the gravest miscalculation he had ever made. Elena drifted in and out of awareness as Julian's vehicle sped along dark, winding roads leading away from the estate. The strange tingling sensation that had spread through her body gradually faded, replaced by a heavy grogginess that made it difficult to think clearly or move with any real strength. She caught fragments of her surroundings, trees rushing past the window, the dim glow of a dashboard light, Julian's tense profile as he gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Where are you taking me?" she managed to mumble, her voice slurred and weak. "Somewhere quiet," Julian answered without looking at her. "Somewhere we can finally talk without interruption." Elena tried to fight against the lingering effects of whatever substance he had used against her, forcing herself to focus, to remember details of the route they traveled, though the heavy fog clouding her mind made it difficult to retain much beyond vague impressions of turns and distances. Eventually, the vehicle slowed and came to a stop before what appeared to be an old, abandoned estate, its grand architecture faded and overgrown with vines, clearly untouched for many years. Julian helped her from the car, his grip firm but not unnecessarily rough, guiding her toward the entrance of the crumbling building. "This was our family's original estate," Julian explained as they walked, his voice carrying an unexpected note of nostalgia beneath the tension. "Before the current territory was established, I was born here. So was Damien. Perhaps it's fitting that everything comes full circle in this place." Inside, the building's interior told a story of long abandonment, dust coating every surface. Faded portraits of ancestors long past lining the walls of a grand hallway. Julian led her into what had once been a formal sitting room, now furnished sparsely with only a few items he had apparently brought recently. A small table, a couple of chairs, and dim lanterns providing the only light against the encroaching darkness outside. He guided her into a chair, and Elena, her strength slowly returning as the effects of the drug began to wear off, studied him carefully, searching for any opening, any weakness she might exploit to escape, or at least buy time until help could arrive. "Julian," she said carefully, keeping her voice as steady as possible, despite the fear still coursing through her. "This isn't going to end the way you want it to. Taking me by force won't make me feel anything for you. It will only make Damien more determined to stop you." Julian's expression flickered with something unreadable, pacing slowly before the small table, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "You don't understand what it means to spend your entire life in someone else's shadow, Elena. Every accomplishment overshadowed, every moment of recognition denied because you happen to be born a few minutes after your twin. I have spent years surviving in exile, watching from a distance while my brother inherited everything that should have been shared, if not entirely mine given my own strengths." "That's not Damien's fault," Elena said gently, despite her fear, recognizing a flicker of genuine pain beneath his obsessive determination. "And it's not something you can fix by taking what belongs to him now." Julian's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Elena thought she saw genuine conflict flash across his features, quickly buried beneath renewed resolve. "I intend to use ancient magic to force a false bond between us, Elena. It is not the same as a true mate bond, but it would be enough. Enough to make you mine in every way that matters, in every way our laws recognize." Elena's blood ran cold at the revelation, understanding now the true extent of his plan, a plan that went far beyond simple kidnapping or persuasion. "That would be a violation beyond anything you've already done," she whispered, horror clear in her voice. "You cannot force a bond that isn't real." "I can, and I will," Julian said, his voice hardening with determination as he retrieved a small, ornately carved box from a nearby shelf, opening it to reveal strange symbols etched into its lining, along with a collection of items that radiated an unsettling, dark energy even Elena could sense despite her human nature. "This magic has been used before, in desperate circumstances. It is not without risk, but it will work." Elena's mind raced, searching desperately for any way to delay him, to buy time until Damien could locate them. "Even if you force this bond, Julian, it won't give you what you actually want. You want to be loved, to be chosen, not for your face or your blood, but for who you truly are. This won't give you that. It will only make you a monster in the eyes of everyone who might have once respected your strength." Her words seemed to strike something within him, a brief hesitation flickering across his features before hardening once again into cold resolve. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps this isn't about being loved anymore. Perhaps it's simply about proving that I am capable of taking what I want, regardless of what anyone else believes I deserve." He began preparing the items from the box with methodical precision, and Elena felt genuine terror rising within her as she recognized the seriousness of his intent, understanding that whatever conflicted feelings might linger within him would not be enough to stop what he had set into motion. Meanwhile, back at the Ashford estate, the search for Elena had expanded rapidly, trackers fanning out across the territory, following the faint remnants of Julian's scent despite the concealment magic he had used to mask his trail. Damien moved among them, his transformation building steadily beneath the surface, an ancient power straining against the careful control he had maintained his entire life. Marcus rode alongside him, watching with growing concern as Damien's eyes flickered between their normal dark brown and something far more primal. A golden glow that spoke of power rarely seen even among Alpha King bloodlines. "Damien," Marcus said carefully, "we will find her, but you need to maintain control until we do. If you lose yourself to the transformation too soon, you may not be able to think clearly enough to actually help her." Damien's jaw clenched tightly, his hands gripping the reins of his horse with white-knuckled intensity. "Every second we spend searching is another second she remains in his hands, Marcus. I cannot simply remain calm while my mate suffers because of my own failure to protect her adequately." "This is not your failure," Marcus said firmly. "This is Julian's crime alone. But losing control of yourself now will not undo what has already happened. It will only make you less effective in bringing her home safely." Damien took several deep, deliberate breaths, forcing the surging power back beneath the surface through sheer force of will, understanding the wisdom in Marcus's words even as every instinct within him screamed to abandon all restraint. You're right, he said finally, his voice tight with controlled tension. I need to think clearly. For her sake. The trackers pressed onward through the darkening forest, following fragments of scent and disturbed earth that suggested Julian's path, gradually narrowing their search toward the territory's outer boundaries, an area that included several old, abandoned properties dating back generations within the Ashford family history. It was one of the eldest trackers, a wolf who had served the pack for decades, who finally recognized the significance of their trajectory. The old family estate, he said suddenly, drawing Damien's immediate attention. The one where you and your brother were born, before the current territory was fully established. This path leads directly toward it. Damien felt a surge of hope mixed with renewed urgency at the revelation. Of course, he would choose somewhere with meaning to him, somewhere that represents everything he believes was unfairly taken from him. How far is it? Marcus asked, already directing the group to adjust their course accordingly. Perhaps 2 hours, at our current pace, the old tracker estimated. Less, if we push the horses harder. Then we push harder, Damien said, his voice carrying an edge of desperate determination. Every minute matters now. As the group accelerated their pursuit, Damien felt the ancient power within him building steadily stronger, no longer entirely something he could suppress through willpower alone. The bond between himself and Elena, threatened now in the most fundamental way possible, was awakening something within him that had lain dormant for generations. An ancient birthright meant only for moments of the gravest necessity. He did not yet fully understand what he was becoming, only that whatever waited for him at that old, abandoned estate would face something far more formidable than the composed, disciplined Alpha King who had ruled the Ashford pack with careful restraint for the past several years. Julian arranged the final items from the ornate box across the small table, his hands moving with the practiced precision of someone who had rehearsed this ritual many times in preparation for this exact moment. Elena watched with mounting dread, her mind racing through every possible option, however small, that might delay him further or create an opportunity for escape. The ritual requires blood from both of us, Julian explained, almost clinically, as he retrieved a small ceremonial blade from within the box. It is not something either of us will enjoy, but it is necessary for the bond to take hold. Please, Elena said, genuine desperation breaking through her attempts to remain composed. Julian, think about what you're truly doing here. This isn't strength. This isn't proving anything except that you're willing to hurt someone innocent to satisfy your own anger. Julian paused, the blade held loosely in his hand, something flickering across his expression that suggested her words had landed somewhere beneath his hardened resolve. For a brief moment, Elena thought she glimpsed the man he might have been under different circumstances, before years of resentment and exile had twisted something fundamental within him. I was innocent once too, Julian said quietly, his voice carrying an unexpected vulnerability. Innocent and hopeful and certain that if I simply worked hard enough, proved myself capable enough, my father would eventually see me as an equal to my brother. That innocence was stripped away long before I ever considered doing anything like this. Then don't let it be stripped away from someone else, Elena pressed, sensing an opening in his hesitation. Whatever was done to you, whatever pain you've carried, hurting me won't undo any of it. It will only add another person's pain to everything you're already carrying. Julian's hand trembled slightly, the blade catching the dim lantern light as he stood frozen, caught between years of carefully cultivated determination and something softer stirring beneath the surface. For a long, tense moment, Elena believed she might have actually reached him, that perhaps this entire nightmare might end without further violence. Then, from somewhere outside the old estate, a sound cut through the tense silence, a deep, guttural roar unlike anything Elena had ever heard, powerful enough that she felt it vibrate through the very foundations of the building around them. Julian's head snapped toward the sound, his expression shifting instantly from vulnerable hesitation to alarmed recognition. That's not possible, he murmured, more to himself than to Elena. He shouldn't be able to access that yet. Not fully. What was that? Elena asked, though some instinctive part of her already suspected the answer, a wild hope rising within her chest despite the fear the sound had also inspired. Before Julian could answer, the old estate's front doors burst inward with tremendous force, splintering from their hinges as something massive and powerful strode into the entrance hallway beyond. Julian moved quickly to the doorway of the sitting room, positioning himself between Elena and whatever approached, though Elena could see genuine fear beginning to replace his earlier composure. What emerged from the darkened hallway bore only a passing resemblance to the wolf form Elena had witnessed once before, during a private moment when Damien had revealed his true nature to her. This form was significantly larger, its fur darker, streaked with what appeared to be faint golden markings that seemed to pulse with inner light, its eyes glowing with an intensity that spoke of ancient, formidable power rather than ordinary strength. This was the legendary form spoken of only in old pack stories, the true Alpha King's ultimate form, a transformation so rare it had not been fully witnessed in generations, awakened now by the desperate need to protect what belonged to him most completely. Julian took an involuntary step backward, his earlier confidence crumbling in the face of a threat far beyond what he had anticipated. "This isn't possible," he repeated, though the words carried little conviction now against the overwhelming presence filling the doorway before him. The massive wolf's golden eyes fixed on Julian with unmistakable fury, a low growl rumbling from deep within its chest, promising retribution far beyond simple punishment. Elena felt a mixture of relief and lingering fear watching the transformation, understanding on some instinctive level that whatever gentleness Damien had always shown her existed now alongside something far more primal and dangerous. "Damien," Elena called out carefully, hoping her voice might reach whatever remained of the man beneath this overwhelming transformation. "Please, I'm all right. He didn't complete the ritual. I'm safe." The massive wolf's head turned slightly toward the sound of her voice, and for a brief moment something in its golden eyes softened, recognition flickering through the primal fury that otherwise dominated its expression. Yet its attention returned quickly to Julian, who remained frozen near the small table, the ceremonial blade still clutched uselessly in his trembling hand. "Brother," Julian said, his voice carrying a desperate edge now, all pretense of confidence abandoned entirely. "We can discuss this. There is no need for violence between us." The massive wolf's response came as a low, rumbling growl that carried clear meaning despite its lack of actual words, a promise that discussion was no longer sufficient given everything Julian had already done. It advanced slowly into the room, each measured step carrying an overwhelming sense of barely contained power. Elena, understanding the danger of the situation escalating into violence within the confined space of the sitting room, called out again, hoping to reach whatever remained of Damien's rational mind beneath the transformation's primal instincts. "Damien, listen to me. I need you here, with me, not lost entirely to whatever this transformation has awakened, please." The massive wolf paused, its golden eyes flickering between Julian and Elena, a visible struggle playing out across its powerful features, as ancient instinct warred with the rational mind that still existed somewhere beneath the overwhelming transformation. Slowly, gradually, the wolf's stance shifted, becoming slightly less aggressive, though the underlying threat toward Julian remained undeniably present. Marcus and several other pack warriors arrived moments later, having followed close behind Damien's incredible speed once his transformation had fully manifested. They took in the scene quickly, understanding immediately the delicate balance required to resolve the confrontation without further escalating the violence already simmering beneath the surface. "Julian," Marcus said carefully, stepping forward with obvious caution despite the danger of approaching the transformed Alpha King. "This can end now, without further bloodshed, if you surrender peacefully and release any claim you believe you have over Elena." Julian's eyes darted between the massive, transformed wolf, the arriving pack warriors, and Elena herself, understanding with dawning clarity that his careful plans had unraveled entirely, that whatever leverage he had believed he possessed had evaporated the moment Damien's ancient power had awakened in response to the threat against his mate. "If I surrender," Julian said slowly, "what happens to me?" "That depends entirely on the choices you make in the next few moments," Marcus answered honestly. "Continued resistance will only ensure a far worse outcome than peaceful surrender might allow." Julian's shoulders slumped slightly, the ceremonial blade slipping from his fingers to clatter uselessly against the dusty floor. Yet even as he appeared to consider surrender, something within his expression suggested this confrontation was far from truly finished, a final, desperate gambit still forming behind his calculating eyes. In the space of a single breath, Julian's expression shifted from resigned defeat to desperate calculation. His hand shot toward the small table, seizing one of the remaining ritual items, a dark crystal pulsing faintly with the same unsettling energy that had radiated from the ornate box. Before anyone could react, he pressed it directly against Elena's arm, releasing a surge of dark energy that momentarily froze her muscles in place, rendering her unable to move or speak. "Everyone stay back," Julian commanded, his voice carrying a frantic edge as he pulled Elena's rigid form against him, using her as a shield between himself and the room full of pack warriors and his transformed brother. "One more step, and I complete the ritual regardless of the consequences to either of us." The massive wolf's growl deepened into something approaching a roar, the sound reverberating through the old estate's walls, yet Damien held himself back, understanding on some level that any hasty action could endanger Elena further. Marcus raised a cautioning hand toward the other warriors, signaling them to remain still despite the tension crackling through the room. "Julian," Marcus said carefully, his voice remaining steady despite the danger of the situation, "this will not end the way you hope. Even if you force this ritual, pack law will never recognize a bond taken through coercion. You will have gained nothing except further condemnation. I don't care about recognition anymore," Julian said, his voice cracking with a mixture of desperation and barely restrained emotion. "I simply want something, anything, that cannot be taken from me the way everything else has been." Elena, still frozen by whatever dark energy Julian had used against her, felt a flicker of movement returning to her fingertips, the paralysis beginning to fade slightly faster than Julian likely anticipated. She forced herself to remain outwardly still, understanding that any premature movement could provoke a dangerous reaction, while quietly gathering whatever strength remained within her rigid muscles. The massive wolf's golden eyes remained fixed on Julian, a visible tension radiating from every powerful line of its transformed body, yet it remained motionless, held back by some combination of rational restraint and genuine fear of endangering Elena further through hasty action. "Let her go, Julian," Marcus said again, taking a slow, careful step forward, his hands raised in a clear gesture of peaceful intent. "This is your final opportunity to walk away from this with any chance of leniency at all." Julian's grip on Elena tightened slightly, his eyes darting nervously between the approaching Marcus and the still motionless, transformed figure of his brother. "Leniency," he repeated bitterly, "as though anything resembling mercy has ever truly been extended to me by this family." It was in that exact moment, as Julian's attention remained divided between Marcus's careful approach and his brother's barely restrained fury, that Elena felt enough strength return to her limbs to act. Summoning every ounce of resolve she possessed, she drove her elbow sharply backward into Julian's ribs, the sudden, unexpected movement catching him entirely off guard. Julian's grip loosened involuntarily from the impact, and Elena wrenched herself free, stumbling forward away from him toward the safety of the approaching pack warriors. The moment her hand released the last physical connection between them, whatever remained of Julian's dangerous leverage evaporated entirely. The massive, transformed wolf's restraint shattered instantly at the sight of Elena breaking free, a powerful surge forward closing the distance to Julian within a heartbeat. Julian, defenseless now without his shield, raised his arms instinctively, yet the transformed Alpha King's overwhelming strength easily subdued him, pinning him firmly against the old estate's dusty floor without inflicting any injury beyond the sheer, undeniable demonstration of dominance. Elena, safely gathered into Marcus's protective grip several feet away, watched with a complex mixture of relief and lingering sorrow as Damien's massive form held his twin brother pinned beneath him, the golden glow of his transformed eyes burning with barely contained fury, yet notably, deliberately, without inflicting any lasting harm despite having every capability to do so. "He's not going to hurt him further than necessary," Marcus murmured, almost to himself, watching the restraint Damien demonstrated even in his most primal, powerful form. Even now, even like this, he remains who he truly is. Slowly, gradually, the massive wolf's form began to shrink and shift, the ancient transformation receding as the immediate danger passed, until finally, Damien knelt on the old estate's floor in his familiar human form, breathing heavily, one hand still firmly pinning his brother's shoulder against the ground. "It's over, Julian," Damien said quietly, his voice carrying exhaustion alongside residual anger. "You've lost. Whatever you hope to gain through all of this, it ends here, tonight." Julian, defeated and disarmed, stared up at his brother with an expression that mixed genuine fear with something that might have been relief, the exhausting burden of his years-long obsession finally reaching its inevitable, unavoidable conclusion. "What happens to me now?" he asked quietly, all remaining defiance drained from his voice. Damien considered the question for a long moment, glancing briefly toward Elena, who remained safely held within Marcus's protective grip, unharmed despite everything Julian had put her through. Something in her steady, resilient gaze seemed to inform his final decision, a reminder that mercy, even toward someone who had wronged them so deeply, remained an essential part of who he truly was, as both a brother and a king. "You will be permanently banished from Ashford territory," Damien said finally, his voice carrying the weight of formal judgment despite his obvious exhaustion. "Your magic will be bound to prevent any further impersonation or deception." You will never again set foot within these lands, and if you attempt to return, or to harm Elena or anyone within this pack again, the mercy I am extending to you tonight will not be repeated." Julian absorbed the judgment silently, a complex mixture of relief and lingering bitterness playing across his features. "You could have killed me tonight," he said quietly. "Many would have understood if you had." "I considered it," Damien admitted honestly, rising slowly to his feet, his exhaustion from the transformation evident in every movement. "But killing you would not undo the pain you've caused, nor would it honor the values I have spent my entire life trying to uphold as this pack's leader. Exile, permanent and absolute, will have to be justice enough." As pack warriors moved forward to secure Julian for his formal banishment, Damien turned immediately toward Elena, crossing the distance between them in several quick strides before pulling her carefully into his arms, checking her thoroughly for any injury, despite her assurances that she remained unharmed. "I'm all right," Elena said softly, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady, reassuring rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. "You came for me. I never doubted that you would." "I will always come for you," Damien murmured, holding her close as the old estate finally fell quiet around them, the immediate danger fully past. "No matter what stands between us, no matter what threatens what we share, I will always find my way back to you." The weeks following that harrowing night at the old estate brought a gradual return to peace across Ashford territory, though the events would remain etched permanently into the memory of everyone who had witnessed them. Julian, true to Damien's judgment, was escorted beyond the territory's borders, under close guard. His ability to disguise his appearance and scent, permanently bound through ancient pack magic overseen by trusted elders who specialized in such matters. Before his final departure, Julian requested a brief, private moment with his brother, a request Damien considered carefully before ultimately granting, understanding that whatever remained unresolved between them deserved some form of closure, however difficult that conversation might prove to be. They stood together at the territory's edge, the morning sun casting long shadows across the boundary line that would soon separate them permanently. Julian's expression carried none of the earlier defiance or desperation, replaced instead by a quiet, exhausted resignation. "I don't expect forgiveness," Julian said finally, breaking the tense silence between them. "I know I don't deserve it, not after everything I've done." Damien studied his twin brother carefully, searching for the boy he had once known before years of resentment and exile had transformed him into someone capable of such profound betrayal. "I don't know if forgiveness is something I can offer right now," Damien admitted honestly, "but I hope, wherever you go from here, you find some way to build a life that doesn't depend on taking what belongs to others." Julian nodded slowly, something unreadable flickering across his features. "Perhaps, in another life, things might have been different between us." "Perhaps," Damien agreed quietly. "But this is the life we have, Julian. Make better choices from here, for your own sake, if nothing else." With those final words exchanged, Julian turned and walked beyond the territory's boundary, his figure gradually disappearing into the distant landscape, leaving behind a complicated chapter that both brothers would carry with them, in different ways, for the rest of their lives. Back at the estate, Elena found herself slowly adjusting to the reality of her new life, no longer simply a nurse living independently in the city, but the formally recognized mate of an Alpha King, a role that carried both privilege and responsibility she was still learning to navigate. The pack, having witnessed firsthand the depth of Damien's devotion to her, along with the incredible power he had unleashed in her defense, welcomed her with a warmth and respect that eased much of her earlier uncertainty about her place within this unfamiliar world. Grace, her closest friend from the hospital, visited frequently during this transitional period, marveling at the dramatic turn Elena's life had taken since that fateful charity gala months earlier. "I still can't quite believe all of this," Grace admitted one afternoon as they walked together through the estate's expansive gardens. "A secret world of wolves, an evil twin brother, ancient magic. It sounds like something from a story, rather than actual life." Elena laughed softly, though genuine relief colored her expression as she considered how far she had come since those first uncertain days. "Believe me, I still have moments where none of it feels entirely real. But then Damien walks into the room, and everything makes sense again, in a way I never expected." As the weeks progressed, preparations began for a proper mating ceremony, one that would formally complete the bond between Damien and Elena in the eyes of pack tradition and law, a celebration meant to honor not only their connection, but the resilience they had both demonstrated throughout the challenges they had faced together. The ceremony took place on a clear evening beneath a sky filled with stars. The entire pack gathered once again, though this time without the shadow of danger looming over the celebration. Elena stood before Damien, dressed in flowing white, her hand held firmly in his as pack elders performed the traditional marking ceremony that would formally bind them together as true mates. "With this bond," the eldest pack elder intoned, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd, "we recognize Elena Voss as the true Luna of the Ashford pack, bound eternally to Alpha King Damien Ashford, chosen by fate itself and proven through trial and unwavering devotion." As the ceremony concluded, a warmth spread through Elena's chest unlike anything she had felt before, the mate bond settling fully into place, a connection deeper and more profound than she had ever imagined possible. Damien pulled her close, his expression carrying a joy that had been notably absent during the tense weeks following Julian's betrayal. "You are the strongest person I have ever known," Damien murmured against her hair as the pack erupted into celebration around them. "Through everything my brother put you through, you never once wavered, never once doubted what we share." "How could I doubt it?" Elena replied softly, "when everything about us has always felt so certain, from that very first moment at the gala." The celebration continued long into the night, pack members offering their formal welcome to their new Luna, sharing stories and laughter that gradually erased the lingering tension of the previous weeks. Marcus, standing nearby with a rare, genuine smile, raised a toast in honor of his king and new Luna, the assembled crowd echoing his sentiment with enthusiastic cheers. In the months that followed, Elena settled fully into her new role, balancing her continued work at the hospital, which she refused to abandon entirely despite her new responsibilities, with her growing duties as Luna of the Ashford pack. She found unexpected fulfillment in bridging both worlds, using her medical training to help establish improved healthcare practices for pack members, while continuing to serve her human patients with the same dedication that had always defined her. Damien, for his part, found himself ruling with renewed clarity and purpose, the trials of the previous months having reinforced his understanding of what truly mattered most in his life and leadership. The pack, having witnessed both the depth of his devotion and the extraordinary power he possessed when that devotion was truly threatened, followed him with a loyalty and respect that had only deepened through the ordeal they had collectively endured. As for Julian, reports occasionally trickled back to the pack of a lone wolf living far beyond their territory's borders, surviving quietly, apparently making no further attempts to reclaim what he had once believed was rightfully his. Whether he had truly found peace with his circumstances, or simply bided his time waiting for some future opportunity, remained uncertain, a lingering question that Damien occasionally considered during quiet moments, though he refused to allow it to overshadow the happiness he had finally found. Elena and Damien's bond only strengthened as the seasons changed, their partnership becoming a foundation of stability and strength for the entire pack, proof that even the darkest attempts at betrayal and manipulation could ultimately be overcome through unwavering loyalty, genuine love, and the courage to fight for what truly mattered most. Their story, whispered among pack members for years afterward, became a testament to the power of a fated bond, strong enough to withstand even the most calculated deception, and to the true strength that could be found not in unchecked power, but in the restraint and compassion shown even toward those who had wronged them most deeply.